Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brett Morris from Junior Appalachian Musicians, and we are here today to talk about diversifying funding sources. So, it may not seem like the most exciting topic in the world, but it is important if you are concerned about your jam program's sustainability, about fundraising for your program, and just about not being quite left in the dark if something happens. And that, in a nutshell, is pretty much the definition of diversified funding. At the risk of sounding like we're talking about the stock market, we're not. Basically, it just means, hey, have a bunch of funding sources that are different from each other. And maybe not the greatest idea to rely on that one source. I realize that many jam programs are set up in a situation where they get the majority of their funding from one source, and those are a little bit different. We're going to talk about the different ways that jam programs are set up here in a minute, but in a nutshell, and this especially applies to our independent community-based jam programs, it is so important to get your money from a variety of sources. So I hope that makes sense, and this is important because you'll have answers to the what if question. What if our funder goes away? What if they are no longer or all of a sudden able to support jam anymore? Our founder, Helen White, always talked about the extreme significance of jam programs that get started and then something happens and they fade out. She hated it. She thought that was the worst thing in the world to have a program like jam offered to kids in a community and then all of a sudden taken away with nothing to replace it. So that's the idea here. We want you all to be as self-sufficient and sustainable as possible. Meanwhile, while we are growing and expanding, and hopefully we'll be able to offer more type of seed funding or ongoing program support funding to our affiliates. We will do that in a sustainable manner, and we want to be only one of the funders. So this is just a little example here of a giving chart for an organization, and you can see how much it is split up. They have monthly giving programs, sponsorships, their major gifts, which are substantial, their direct appeals with donors, their event giving, and grants. So it can look a whole lot of different ways for you all. One thing I wanted to mention before we go too much further, and I can answer further questions about this and actually be of assistance if your organization wants to look into your fiscal management and tax returns to make sure this has been calculated correctly. But the public support rule is part of your 990 filing, which is your federal tax return for a 501c3 organization. So if you file a 990, do you know about the public support test? Basically, the IRS governs that each publicly supported organization, like yourself, unless you are a foundation, which none of you are. If you are a publicly supported organization, then at least 1/3 of your income, of your donations, must be given by donors who give less than 2% of your overall receipts. Now, the overall receipts do go back 5 years. And so basically, you tabulate 5 years worth of income, or if you're a newer organization, not until you have reached the 5-year mark. But you take that amount and you calculate 2% of that amount, and any donor who has given more than that 2%, you can only count up to the 2% mark. So it sounds complicated. It's not so much that way, but we need to make sure that everyone is following this rule, and that if you have exceeded this, in the example of you've had one donor that has supplied your income way more than that 2% mark and it's going over the 2/3 mark, then your organization is at risk for being turned into a foundation instead of a publicly supported organization. which is a big deal. So if you want more information about this, please let me know, and I can talk more about it, give examples, help you calculate, refer you to a CPA, that sort of thing. Don't mean to scare anybody, but I just wanted to throw that out there as another reason for diversifying your funding, even if your organization is small. Which I should note that if your organization is operating under the certain threshold of, I believe it is $25,000 of income each year, you are not required to fill out the full 990. So the public support rule likely does not apply, but we need to check on that. Okay, so just a little bit more of background information for folks who may not be super aware of all the different ways JAM programs are set up. Many of them are run through arts councils, especially in North Carolina. In North Carolina, about 10 of the programs that identify as JAM are also TAPS programs, and they are supported through the North Carolina Arts Council, who gives them a monetary annual award. Many other JAM programs are run through similar arts centers, which is just a likely fit for a JAM program. Some of you are self-incorporated. You have your own 501c3 status. This used to be kind of rare, but I'm seeing more and more of it. And we're actually going to be doing another webinar at some point on developing your own 501c3 and why it's not as scary as you may think. So if you're interested in that, please keep up with our weekly webinar series that we're doing online. Many of you are, well, actually not many, but several are run through a public school system or closely work with a public school system, or perhaps you are a charter school. Others have ties with an educational foundation that works with the school system. Some are run through governmental agencies, which may be your town or city. It could be a department of the town or city, like the recreation department or museum department. And there's also the hard to classify sort of cooperative extension 4-H JAM program, which we've had several of over the years. Others are run through after-school programs, which are generally federally funded, or maybe you're working with Boys and Girls Club, especially as a site. Others are run through School of the Arts, which are 501c3s themselves, or just any other type of nonprofit. There are different variations there in that category. And we also have some special sort of unique fiscal agents, which just shows how you can think outside the box. One of those in particular is a rural health clinic or a wellness center that does a lot of activities and services for the community, for kids and their families. So that was also a great fit. So just like the different types of fiscal agents, there are different types of funding. We see a lot, of course, of the arts agency funding, after school funding, different types of community funding or foundation funding. And this past year, we've also seen special funding like the CARES Act, Payroll Protection Program, come into play. So the first two categories, just for more informational purposes about the fiscal agents of some of our JAM affiliates. First is arts agency funded. And like I mentioned earlier, our North Carolina TAPS programs funded by the North Carolina Arts Council are similar in nature to our Tennessee programs, as well as some others in North Carolina that have been funded by the arts organization South Arts. The biggest difference in these two are that the North Carolina Arts Council is government money and South Arts is private money. So no matter where that is coming from, this regular, consistent funding is a great situation to be in. There is another way to become funded by arts agencies, such as at your state level. In Virginia, some JAM programs have worked with the Virginia Commission for the Arts, especially to get started. And others in Tennessee have received support from the Tennessee Arts Commission. And I do believe, if I'm not speaking out of turn, that our affiliates in upstate South Carolina, the YAMS, have received support from their state arts organization. So, even if you're not involved in some of those annual opportunities, such as TAPS or through South Arts, there are grant opportunities that come about generally on an annual or biannual basis. And I will be sending out information for each of the particular states and those deadlines and the categories and just some more details if you're interested. The other great situation to be in is to be involved with one of those federally funded after school programs. Generally, they get funded in 3-year or 5-year spans. And in Virginia, we have the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and in Tennessee, we have the LEAPS programs. And those are the two states where we see affiliates partnering with the established after school program in public schools. So, what that does is provides the JAM program with all of the infrastructure required. The students are already enrolled, the site is at the school, the transportation is given, there is money for supplies and for paying the teachers, etc. So, in a way, this is the least like an original community based JAM program in that outside folks really don't have any control. It's all maintained by the school system and the after school program. So there are some limitations here, of course, as far as only enrolling students from that public school and perhaps some time limitations. Perhaps they only get 1 hour one day after school. But we do have a couple of affiliates who work with those programs, and they are great assets to our communities. So this next part is informational, as well as hopefully giving you all some new ideas or reviving some old ideas as far as raising money. And this is written as if we were in regular times as far as event-based fundraising being an option, because hopefully we're going to get back to there soon. As far as having a donor base, it is important to always be continually recruiting individual donors, working with your advisory board or your fiscal agents board to explore relationships with people they know. You can do direct solicitation. This might include sending out a mailing or doing an email blast, which is much more friendly on the wallet, or having one of the web campaigns. A lot of organizations have success with Giving Tuesday, which occurs after Black Friday, after Thanksgiving every year. Or a lot of platforms have also offered a one-to-one match or extra incentive for getting involved in their campaigns that help nonprofits across the country or perhaps across the world. It's also important when we can to get those kids out playing music again in the community, because nothing really raises money easier than children playing music and people seeing firsthand what an effect a program like JAM has on the community. Another great way to approach an individual donor is, hey, would you like to sponsor a student for a semester or a year? People really like to feel like they are buying into it somehow and that they can see exactly where their money is going. And of course, I don't think JAM is a hard sell at all. I think it is one of the easiest things to sell in the world, because even people who may not like old time or bluegrass music can see the benefit of music education and a smile on a child's face. So that's a great way to approach it. Sponsor a child, especially if your program is working in a rural or low income area. It's a great way. Another avenue that is greatly overlooked, and I do realize that many of the civic organizations listed here are kind of fading out. Older population has been committed to organizations like the Elks and the Moose and the Rotary and the Kiwanis Clubs and the Ruritan and the Lions, and I know that there are some that I am forgetting. But I know that we are seeing a decline in those community organizations a little bit, but I'm a firm believer in the work that they do to support other organizations and just support people in their community, which is the idea. Most of them have different values that they prioritize, but for the most part, I don't see any of them saying no to children's education. And some of these organizations, I know for a fact that Kiwanis has college and high school levels. Hey, that's a great way to get volunteers. So, the best way to approach these folks in non COVID times, find out when their meetings are. Ask if you can present a quick little portion. Take a kid or two with you to play some music, and it might be during their lunch hour or something like that. But it is a great way to network, a great way to spread awareness about your program, and a great way to get support because it's so hard to say no to kids. So look those organizations up in your community. If you're not aware if they're out there still or if they're doing anything, see what you can find out. Other community funding sources include approaching your local and regional corporations. Even the poorest of areas generally do have some kind of industry, some kind of somebody who is willing to give back to their community. And I'll also take this chance to advocate for your community banks who are generally very dedicated to giving back to their communities that they work in. So find out whenever they do that giving. If you can, make some connections. Don't be afraid to ask questions, make phone calls, send an email, connect with other people. Your small businesses are great for sponsorships of your program, especially if there's some kind of event and you can help them with advertising. Your larger businesses are almost all required within their own structure to provide annual contributions to the community that they are stationed in or that they serve. So look these folks up. Simple internet search for largest employers in your area or corporate giving. I can help y'all with this. If you just want to give me a shout, I'd be happy to lend a hand in helping you all diversify your funding. But don't be afraid to ask these corporations for support. Don't be afraid at all. You can't help unless you try. If your JAM program provides after-school snacks, bottled water, anything like that, hit up your local grocery stores. I realize you can't do it month after month after month, but if you have a couple of different corporations serving your community, make sure you ask them all. Bulk stores are usually also very good about donating. Sam's, Costco, places like that. You might also find that your small businesses in your area will be willing to provide donations for any kind of silent auction or raffle or fundraising items for events in the future. But if you do want to do a raffle, check with me first. I do have some information about that we won't discuss today. But there are some legalities concerning raffles, especially if they are online. Okay, folks, another area that is very widely unexplored by JAM programs, but that we have found to be super successful, is funding from your local municipality. So that means your town, your city, your county. So if you're going to be specific about the area that your program serves, you then go to the corresponding municipality. Find out when their fiscal year begins and ends. It's generally July or the calendar year of January, but generally the business year of July. So find out when they start to determine their budget, when they have those discussions for the upcoming year, and make sure you get on the agenda at one of those public meetings. They're public, all you have to do is sign up, and you get at least a few minutes to make your spiel. So what we have found to be very successful in the very rural area of Southwest Virginia, where often these municipalities claim to not have much money, is that we have brought just a few kids to a meeting in person. Of course, this was pre-COVID. Have them play a song. We do a little spiel about JAM, whether we're trying to start a new program or get support for a program. And we have found this to be tremendously successful, like upwards of $5,000 successful. So it is totally worth it. If perhaps you are trying to start a new program or you're just too new and you don't have kids who can play yet, give me a shout, or maybe partner with one of your neighboring programs, or even kids who have aged out or graduated, so to speak. They're fine. Any person under 18 who can play a string instrument, the Appalachian style, is going to do the trick, let me tell you. The next items of note, as far as corporate funding that is strictly musically related, many jam programs have had success with the Diodario Foundation. As you all know, Diodario makes strings and other accessories, and their next grant cycle is April 30th deadline, so that happens twice a year, and programs can apply to basically get free stuff. So strings, capos, picks, that sort of thing. And in the past, it has been around $500 to $750 a year in supplies. So that is definitely worth pursuing. And of course, in accompaniment to this video, I will be providing all of the necessary links. The other corporate funder that Jam Inc. has had success with in the past is Guitar Center. And this isn't to say that the other corporations and suppliers of things that we need are not worth pursuing, because they probably are. But we can look further into this as time goes. It just so happens that I have not pursued any of the other ones in recent years and don't have quality information. Also, it sort of goes without saying, but look into your local music stores if you have not yet already for support, or do your own instrument drive in your community. Say, hey, who has guitar laying around their house, or a mandolin, or a banjo, or fiddle in the basement? Bring them to Jam, where they will be loved and used. Many other Jam programs do receive support from private foundations. So usually this involves grant making, grant writing, which there will be future webinars about. But when you're doing your searching, some of the target or interest areas that you might want to look toward as far as private foundations who clarify what their priorities are, you want to find those who support education and, of course, children. That goes without saying. Children, education, arts, culture, history, music, that's another give me, after school programming, and that might be that kids have a safe place to go after school. Youth building or empowerment, leadership skills, mentoring, any kind of youth serving priorities. Wellness is another thing that can be taught in, as far as music being good for your health. Also, some others to look at might be intergenerational learning, building family relationships, or those private foundations who simply want to serve their home community and simply to serve children in that home community. So many of you may be wondering how in the world you get connected with private foundations that are going to give you easy, free grant money. Well, if you are not sure who those foundations are in your community, you're not sure what foundations have been supporting other organizations, then you can do a simple search on the internet. GuideStar and 990 Finder basic information on foundations is offered through those. You can also pay for subscriptions to Foundation Center, Grant Watch, and many other sites like that, where you pay monthly or an annual fee and they give you access to entire databases. In the past, it has been 4 or 5 years ago, we offered a network-wide subscription to Foundation Center, but I found that not many folks were using it, so the cost analysis wasn't good enough to keep it going. If this is something that you all are interested in, perhaps we can look into it again or some kind of option like that. Here are just a few notes thinking outside the box. In Virginia, there has been some success with District 3 transportation, which is just like the community transport, generally carries older folks around. But they were hauling our JAM kids in a couple of different counties for 50 cents a child per trip. So that was a great transportation alternative when the local school system was unable to provide. And generally, that reason is because of funding. Churches are another option here. Of course, then you get into liability concerns and all that, but we can address that another day. It's a great idea to join your local Chamber of Commerce. This puts you on the radar of all the other businesses and folks in the community who are interested in supporting nonprofits. So generally for nonprofits, it's a nominal fee. We definitely suggest getting involved there. Look toward your local university or college programs that may provide community service for students because they can be a great source for volunteers. And here are a few more ideas just to think outside the box a little bit more. Federally, USDA has offered after school or snack or evening meal programs. Some of your community foundations or hospital foundations are interested in supporting programs that improve the life and well-being and wellness of their community. So JAM definitely qualifies there. It's important to partner with other nonprofits in your community, have fundraising events, split the proceeds, have the kids go and perform, raise awareness. It's all about getting your name out there and becoming a community staple, becoming that thing that people want to support and don't have any hesitation about. In other local success stories across the JAM region, we've had a local sheriff's department come out of nowhere and want to pay for all of the kids' tuition for the rest of the year. How cool is that? So that was an avenue I have never thought about approaching. What a wonderful thing. Also, are there any famous people from your region? Sometimes it's good to look those people up and see if they're already giving back in some way to their home community or if they may want to, especially if they're musicians. Here are just a few more notes about board development and the consideration of that as you go into your fundraising plans for upcoming years. Just think about whether or not your advisory board members, if you have one, are engaged in fundraising, and what could they do? Where are their strengths and weaknesses? Who are the people that they know? And of course, we do expect there to be some challenges. Please feel free to let me know what your challenges are, what your questions are, and how we can help. Throw it out there. So that's about all I have for today. Feel free to get in touch at any point in time, and thank you for listening.